Okay, good afternoon. My name is Jim Tritton, and I'm your host today for the Military Writers Society of America Education Series, which we're going to have Greg Elliot make the presentation. Greg has been a frequent presenter at MWSA, and his bio was included with the original invitation that you all saw. And the condensed version is to remind everybody that he's a credible source for what he's about to talk about because he's been writing for movies and TV and taught television writing at UCLA for 15 years. And he still teaches privately, mentoring some of the better students that he's had over the years. So anything else that you'd like to add, Greg, or do you want to take it away?
No, that's plenty.
All right, and I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to actually mute you, Robert, and I'm going to mute everybody who shows up, so except for Greg, and then that way, if there's dogs barking, they won't be there. All right. If you need to say something, unmute yourself. Take it away, Greg.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. Welcome, military writers. This is, as you probably all know, writing for big screens and small, a primer on writing for television and the movies. And part one is what you want to accomplish before you sit down to type fade in. Now, as anyone who has seen movies and television, I'm going to assume that's all of you, understands, there's a great deal that is similar about the way movies are created and the way television are created. There are also some differences. We're going to talk over the course of these next today and in future episodes. We're going to talk about how to write for television or for the movies. And when there is a difference, I'm going to point out that difference, and we'll chat about that. But most of it is very similar. Let's start with, again, the most obvious difference between a movie and TV is that a movie tells a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You open with where we are, when we are, we're in space or we're in the Old West or whenever we are, wherever we are, who our main characters are, who our villains are, and what the story is. And you have a beginning, you have a middle, and in the end, there's a big wrap up, and you either go home happy or you go home sad, depending on what the movie's about. Television, if you stop and think about it, think about any show that you like to watch. It's pretty much the same every week. You have the same main characters. They're doctors or they're lawyers or they're members of the FBI or members of the police department, and they're doing whatever they do each week. They're doing a new version of that, but the characters are the same, the situation is the same, usually the city is the same and the time is the same, and you're continuing the series. And then there is a third category that sort of splits the difference between the way we write movies and the way we write TV, and that's a pilot, the first episode of a new television series, which, if you stop to think about it for a second, has to start like a movie. We don't know anything. So you have to tell us where we are, when we are. We're back to the Old West, or we're back to space, or wherever we are, whenever we are, who our main characters are. The main difference between a pilot and a movie or the rest of television is that at the end there is no the end. There is no ending. And the pilot, instead of ending like a movie ends, the pilot ends by launching the series, by making the viewer want to tune in next week or in the next 5 seconds or whenever the next episode comes on, and seeing what happens next. So these are the three kinds of writing that we do in Hollywood. We're writing for the movies, we're writing for TV, or we're creating a new television show, which is its own, literally, it's its own animal.
Animation and the groundbreaking storytellers.
So, where to start? For both television and for the movies, writers don't start by sitting down at their computers, as I said a minute ago, and write fade in. There's a number of things that both writing in the movies and writing in television entail before you get there. You're going to, whether you're writing the movies or whether you're writing TV or whether you're writing a brand new episode of a brand new series, you're going to sketch out your story. What's your story about? And if you're writing a movie, this is called a treatment, and it's usually between 2 and 10 pages long, and it sketches out where we are, when we are, who the heroes are, who the villains are, what the story is. If you're writing for television, you do in essence the same thing, but you do it slightly differently. There's a number of steps. By the way, most of what I'm going to tell you, both this week and in the episodes that follow, the webinars that follow, I never went to school for this. Ironically, I taught television writing at UCLA for 15 years, but I never went to school for this. I learned on the job. I wrote a script that somebody liked, and they hired me, and then they taught me how to write. And one of the things that I'm going to tell you, here's one of the other main differences between movies and television. I wrote, by the way, I wrote for movies first. I wrote a movie script that people liked. I had a bunch of meetings in a bunch of famous places with literally Academy Award winners. That movie never got made. I wrote another movie, similar, more meetings in fancy places, lunch at the Polo Lounge, blah, blah, blah. That movie never got made. I wrote an episode of Star Trek Voyager, and 6 weeks later, I was sitting with friends and watching it going, I think I like this better. But I've written for both. I understand both. But the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences between the way we write television and the way we write movies is time. From the moment I pitched my idea to the Star Trek Voyager people to the time I was watching it on television was 6 weeks. And the way that we write television, the way I'm about to tell you that we in Hollywood write television, is primarily driven by you have to get to the end in 6 weeks. You can take 2 years to write a movie. You can take 2 years to write a pilot because nobody's waiting for the next episode. But when you're writing on television, you have always in the back of your brain that you've got to get it out, and you've got to get it out on time. And what I'm about to tell you is the most efficient way anybody has figured out. I worked on a number of different shows, and one of the interesting things when you come into a new TV show, new for me, when I came into a new TV show, all the writers meet that first day, and they all tell stories about where they've been and what they've been working on and how they did their work. And what was interesting to me is that the way we write was all the same. A very few outlying TV shows write television differently from what I'm about to tell you, but every writer that I've ever worked with pretty much does exactly what I'm going to tell you. So the first thing in television, the first thing you come up with is a logline. A logline is usually 1 sentence long, and it gives you the idea behind that story. And again, it's important to know what a logline is not. A logline does not tell you the story. A logline makes you want to know more. A logline tells you enough to make you want to know more. So we're going to look at a logline here. This is we're gonna make up just for you guys, just for today. We're making up our own TV show that we're going to write, and it's called The Headless Horseman of Chatterbox Falls. And the logline for this show would be: in 1880s America, a headless horseman disrupts the city father's attempt to move a cemetery. The fathers hire a tracker to hunt the horseman down. Notice this does not tell you the story. It doesn't even tell you a beginning, middle, and end. It tells you enough, if you're interested, to make you want to know more. Okay, so you start with that logline, and then you go on to your beginning, middle, and end. And again, the way I was taught, these are also very succinct. They're very short. They're usually a sentence or maybe too long, and they're carving out the arc that this story, this pilot, in this case, we're talking about the first episode of a new series, this pilot is going to take. And, hello? Did I just lose my thing? That would be terrible. Oh, here we are. And that would be, no, where's our beginning, middle, and end? Here's our beginning, middle, and end. Beginning. Now, the beginning is going to sound a lot like a logline. In 1880 rural America, a young girl sees a headless horseman gallop across her father's fields. She races home, discovers the headless horseman in her kitchen, and tells her father he looked convincing. Even knowing who he was, she was scared. Dad tells daughter her mother's resting place will remain sacred. The middle. As the city councilmen begin the process of moving a graveyard in order to make way for an electric company that will light the city, the headless horseman appears, scaring the daylights out of them and warning them to stop. And the end is the city council hires a tracker who swears he will hunt down the horseman and destroy him. Now, this is your beginning, your middle, and your end. Jim, are you talking?
Yeah, we can't see your slide.
Ah, crap. This is I think what's giving me trouble is switching back and forth, turning it off and on again. So, that's really annoying.
Just go to the third slide.
Now, what do you see?
I still see the first
Oh,
slide.
I see. Okay.
You see, what do you see?
The headless horseman.
Ah, crap. Well, okay,
Well, there was so much to read there. That's why I wanted to make sure we could see it because it was
I
too hard.
think you can hit
There we go.
slideshow.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now just
tap
go to the
on
next slide.
slideshow. There you go. Yeah.
The problem is if we're turning it off and on as often as I hope we're turning it off and on, this may give us a bit of trouble. But let's move on. Okay, so there we are.
That's
So
just the headless horseman slide. You want to go to
That's
slide
right.
3.
So there's our log line in 1880s America, headless horseman, blah, blah, blah. Here's our beginning.
There we
middle.
go. That's it. That's what we
In
wanted.
1880 rural America, a young girl sees a headless horseman gallop across her father's fields. She races home, discovers a headless horseman in the kitchen, tells her father he looked convincing. Even though he was, she was scared. Dad tells daughter her mother's resting place will remain secret. The middle, as the city council begins moving the graveyard to make a way for an electric company, the headless horseman appears, scaring the daylights out of them. The end. The city council hires a tracker who swears he will hunt down the horseman and destroy him. Okay, now, I do hope we don't have to go back every time I hope we don't have to go back to the beginning every time we want to come back to the slideshow. Anyway, that may be what we have to do. All right, so now you've got your log line. You've got your beginning, middle, and end. And the next thing you work on is beats. And again, my mentor who taught me beats said these are the guidelines. We won't call them rules. These are the guidelines for when you're writing beats. He said a beat is one line long, not one sentence long, one line from one side of the page to the other side of the page. This is a beat. He said if you can't fit the next thing that happens into one line, you have not reduced it to its essence. He said you can kick those margins out if you need to from 1 inch to ½ inch. You can use abbreviations if you need to, but if you still can't get it down to a line, you need to pare it down further. Beats are the next thing that happens that drives the story forward. They are one line long. This happens, this happens, this happens. They're clear. They don't need to be detailed. They don't need to be grammatically correct, but they have to make sense. This happens, this happens, this happens. Beats are not broken into scenes. They're not broken into acts. They're only the next thing that happens in the story. And this might make sense. Beats are going to carry you from the beginning to the middle. Okay, so we start in that field. Now, how do we get to that middle? What happens to get us to that middle? And then what are the beats that happen to get us to that end? That's why we start with a beginning, a middle, and end. Let's go back to our slideshow and hope it works. No. Well, okay.
We can see the slide, but you have all the editing stuff. If
Yeah.
that's good enough, just keep going and don't try to display the entire screen.
Well, what's really irritating, here we go. Okay. Now what do you see?
Still same thing, hasn't moved. We're on the beginning, middle, and the end. We can see that slide, we can read it. That's good enough.
No, well, let's...
Same
Now what do you see? Same?
thing, hasn't changed. Beginning, middle, end slide, and all the editing stuff on the sides.
Yeah, I should have known that this. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have. But stopping and starting the slideshow is the anathema here.
There was a little button that said resume slideshow.
There is, yep,
There was,
um,
yeah.
but that's not working.
The other thing to try is at the bottom right, there should be a little button that right now it's yellow around the editing part. Then there's 4 slides, then there's a screen. If you click on the screen, that'll probably get you back to your show.
See, the problem is that on my screen, I'm seeing exactly what I want you to see. The problem
Right.
is that you're not seeing what I'm seeing, and that's a concern.
Can you move the
Are
slide?
are
If
you
can
sharing
move
the
slide,
screen?
it doesn't matter.
Sorry?
No?
I'm sorry. I was having trouble hearing what was being said.
All right, Greg, this is Jim. If you can move the slide forward, if we can see the next slide, stay in this view right here.
Well, but the problem is I'm not seeing what you're seeing.
I know. I'm okay. We're seeing your face now.
Yeah, hold on.
All right, now we got screen sharing. I can see the beginning, middle, and end slide.
Yeah.
And so the question is, can you move that?
Yeah, I can move that.
Yeah.
Now you
There
should
you
do
go.
that.
That. Stick with
let's
that.
just do it. All right, we'll just do it this way. All right.
Yeah.
So here are the beats. In 1880, rural America, at dusk, a young girl crosses an empty field. At the sound of a galloping horse, she turns. She watches something, terrified. A headless horseman gallops at full speed across the far side of the field. The girl turns, gasping, and races toward a house which looks too far away. The girl bursts into the house and runs into the kitchen only to see the headless horseman sitting there. Here, by the way, is one of those abbreviations so I can get it to fit on one line. Father, the girl says, you gave me such a fright, and I knew who you were. The girl helps her father unbutton the coat. He extracts himself from the costume. He seems a gentle soul, a loving father. He tells his daughter that her mother will continue to rest in peace. All right, so this is the beginning of our story, and these are the beats. And notice, by the way, this is the next thing that happens that drives the story forward. I would say one of those, next to the last, he seems a gentle soul, a loving father. Does that drive the story? Maybe I'm cheating on that one. But you get the idea. Beat, 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 beat. This is the story we're telling, and this is how we're telling it. All right. So, one of the great things about beats is that beats tell you the part of the story you know. They also show you the parts of your story you don't yet know. Let's take an example. A father and daughter in a driving rainstorm are being chased by our bad guy who's been hired by the city councilman. And they're fleeing, and they get to the river, and the bridge has been washed out. Now, what's the next thing that happens? Somehow they get across the river. This is my mentor said that beats were for him a talisman against writer's block, because it's okay in a first draft of a beat to say somehow they get across the river. You either stop and figure it out right now, or if you haven't got any ideas, you write yourself a placeholder and you keep moving because you don't let that stop the story. You might say, the reason the bridge is washed out is because a barge has crashed into the bridge in the flood, and the barge is full of wine casks. And father says, I have an idea. And then the bad guy comes running down, and he sees 2 wine casks floating down the river, and he goes, oh no, they're getting away. And he runs down the river, and then father and daughter come out of hiding and go on. That still doesn't explain how they get across the river, but that might be, again, sometimes some beats work, some beats don't. Sometimes you toss them out, sometimes you move them somewhere else. Beats are very malleable, but the beat process guides you. Your tent posts are that beginning and middle and end. How do I get to the middle? And then how do I get to the end? Okay. Things that aren't beats. Let's talk about that for a second. The city council discusses the farmer, who's really the headless horseman, the farmer's alibi. That's not a beat, because nothing happens that drives your story. If, however, you said the city council gets together And in discussing the farmer's alibi, they realize he must have been lying. Aha! This drives the story. They have a conversation, is not a beat. In the conversation, they decide X or Y. Yes, that's a beat. That's the way you keep your story moving. You keep your story driving in your beats. Now, once you have your beats worked out, you're going to go through them again. You're maybe going to move them around. You're going to toss some out. You're going to go back and fix those placeholders. By the way, I'll tell you one quick story. I worked on Star Trek Voyager, their first season. The best way to say this is I didn't get the job I was hoping for on Voyager, and I went to another series where I did get the job I was hoping for. And that show got canceled. So I came back to Star Trek Voyager for the third season. And I was pitching a story to the I was the new kid. Those guys were ruthless. Oh my God. When I came back, I was pitching more than one story to them. And when I came, and my mentor on Star Trek Voyager was named Jerry Taylor. She was one of the creators of Voyager. And I'm pitching to Jerry, but I'm pitching to everybody. And Jerry stops me in my first story and says, no, Greg, we did something like that in season 2. And one of the other writers said, and if you'd been watching us, you would know that, wouldn't you? These are the guys I'm working with. These are the guys, I'm the new kid. I'm the one coming in. So one of the other, I'm pitching the story, and one of the other creators of Voyager says, I'm not following. I wish I had a beat sheet. And I said, oh, I've got a beat sheet. He said, give it to me. He gave it to the secretary. She making copies and bringing it back to everybody. And I'm just waiting because these guys are ruthless. Because in my beat sheet are placeholders. Somehow they get across the bridge. I've got 2 or 3 of those in my beat and I'm waiting. And none of them say a word. And then it dawns on me. That's because they write beat sheets just like this. This is what a beat sheet is. Something happens here is a perfectly acceptable beat sheet, and no reason me pitching a story that they've already done, they can give me crap for that. Me giving them the beat sheet, no, that's what beat sheets are. Anyway, moving on. When you work that beat sheet and beat it out and get rid of all the placeholders and have the story in the order you know, then you're moving on to an outline. We're going to talk about script writing software a little bit tonight and a little more in future webinars. But the point where you switch from, you can write beats any way you want. You can write beats on a napkin. You can write beats on your computer, on Word. You could write beats on a pencil and paper and a legal pad. But at some point, you're going to switch to script writing software. And the most logical place most people think is when you go from beats to outline. And here's the process of going from beats to outline. You take your beat sheet and you look at it and you say, how many of these beats happen in the same place? Maybe it's only one beat. There's that girl in the field. The horse is galloping by. She's running for the farmhouse. Those beats are in one scene in that field. So you start with what's called a scene heading. Where are we? And we're going to look at an example of that in just a second, assuming we can get the thing to work again. You start with that, and then you take those beats. The first thing you do is just give your scene headings. Okay, we're exterior farm. Now we're interior kitchen of the farmhouse. Now we're exterior walking on the road. Now we're interior. You're just putting your beats where they occur with a scene heading where those beats occur. Maybe there's one beat for that scene. Maybe there are 3 beats that are in that scene, or maybe you may discover when you sit down and look at it that this one beat is actually 2 scenes, but you're breaking it into scenes. Where does each occur? And again, I'm going to show you an example of in just a minute. And then you're going to write a paragraph or 2 about, you're going to expand those beats. What happens? What's that farmhouse look like? What's that farm look like? What's that horse look like? Are there any details that we need to know? You're going to start to put those in your outline. Somebody once joked that a good outline, and an outline, by the way, a couple of things about outlines. Outlines are, again, because most of Hollywood works the same way, Outlines are industry standard. They are about 15 pages long. No, yeah, they're about 15 pages long. And the average hour of the average television show is 35 scenes. So when you finish your outline, if you've got 15 pages and anywhere between 30 and 40 scenes, you're in good shape. That's a good start on your hour. By the way, if you should get to the end and you've only got 20 scenes or you've got 50 scenes, don't panic yet. And again, in later webinars, we'll talk more about that. So, but you're gonna take your beats and you're gonna create it into this document called an outline. And in a perfect world, that's going to be 15 pages or fewer, and it's going to be about 35 scenes. So let's take a look at. Let's hold our breath and take a look at what the outline might look like. So here are our beats. No, I don't want to, crap. What do you see on the screen right now?
Okay, I'm looking at in 1880, and then the last line is "Father," the girl says, and I see all the editing stuff around it.
Okay. Come on. I don't know.
There you go. Now I got a full screen.
Okay. All right. So thank you. Now we're gonna race through all the stuff we already know, and we're going to get to our outline. Okay, here we are. And that first thing is called a scene heading, by the way. Exterior, farm field, dusk. There are 3 parts to your scene heading. First, you're either inside or you're outside, which is INT period or EXT period. And if you're in a car, you're inside. If you're in a cave, you're inside. Here's the way to determine if you're inside or outside. If it were a sunny day and the sun were shining on you, you're exterior. If you're on a porch or in a car or in a cave, if you're in a forest, if you were in a clearing, the sun would be shining on you, you're exterior. So that's how you know it. Interior, exterior. The second part is where, farm, field. And the third part is a timestamp. This one is dusk. The most common timestamps are either day or night. We'll talk a bit later today and in future episodes also. We'll talk a bit more about what other timestamps might be. But this one is dusk. Okay, so that sets up our scene. Now we're taking those beats and we're expanding them a bit, and they look like this. The field, now only stubble, is bordered by a dense stand of timber. The sun has recently set and pink-tinged clouds fade in the blue sky. Words appear on the screen. Rural New York, 1880. The words fade. A young girl, Maggie, 8, scans the far side of the field as if looking for something. From behind her comes the sound of a horse approaching at full gallop. Maggie turns, her face becoming a mask of terrified shock. On the far side of the field, near the tree line, a black horse gallops into view. The rider wears a trench coat with a wide collar and has no head. The headless horseman raises a fist as he gallops by and cries, "Woe to any who defile my grave!" Maggie turns and races toward... I can't even read the whole damn thing. Anyway, you can see it. Maggie turns and races toward the cabin, which looks too far away. Okay, now we're going to look at those big 4. The first is, where are we? Here's the first part of that. We're in exterior, a farm field, dusk. The second part of where are we this is called setting your scene. When the first action line tells us more about where we are. What about that field? The field is stubble. It's bordered by timber. The sun has recently set. Pink clouds fade to the sky. Okay. Who is here? Maggie, our 8-year-old, and the headless horseman. By the way, they're in caps, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What are they doing? Maggie is looking for something. The headless horseman is galloping into view. What are they saying? There's only one line here. Woe to any who defile my grave. These are the big 4. Where are we? Who is here? What are they doing? What are they saying? There will be a few scenes that don't have all 4 of those, but not many. Most of the time, This is a scene, and we're not going any further in our beat sheet because this is one scene. The next would be the inside of that cabin when the little girl comes in and sees a headless horseman standing or sitting at the kitchen table. So that's the way you. This is the process. You start with that. You start with that log line. You get yourself a beginning, a middle, and an end. You beat that story out, and you take that beat and you turn it into an outline. And again, you're doing all of that before you sit down and write fade in. So there is another document that you want to work on if you're writing. This is true for movies too, by the way. You want a document called a Bible. And a Bible is how basically what we know about your characters. Bibles have changed. I was writing Star Trek Voyager 30 years ago, and television has changed a great deal over the last 30 years. And so Bibles have branched out, but we're gonna take a quick look right now at what, and back in my day, what used to go into a Bible, and I'll tell you about the parts that are beginning to change a bit. And this should work just like it's supposed to because we're not doing anything fancy schmancy. Okay, so a pilot pitch Bible. You may include your log lines. That's one of the things that's changing, not so much anymore. You may start with your teaser, like that girl in the field and a headless horseman gallops by. You're going to write your world. Where are we? When is it? Your tone. This is serious. This is funny. This is a murder mystery. This is dark. What's your tone? And we're going to talk about theme a bit. Theme is one of those things, I had to learn this the hard way, I guess. Theme kind of sneaks up on you. And the best description I got of a fellow writer, the UCLA Writers Program took writers like me and taught us how to teach. And they thought that the best people to be teaching it are the people actually doing it. And one of my fellow writers said this about theme. He said, you ask a student, what's your story about? And they will tell you, well, it's about this farmer and his daughter, and he's trying to keep mom's grave from being desecrated. If you say, what's the story really about? They'll tell you theme. They'll say, it's really about family. It's about tradition. It's about honoring the promises you made to people and doing whatever you can to keep them. That's theme. And when I talk with my students about theme, I say, put your theme in your Bible. Don't rush it. It may come to you slowly over time. When theme used to come to me, I've written, besides all the movie scripts I've written that never got made, I've written a number of pilots that also never got to television. But the theme would occur to me slowly, and I would think, oh, nobody will know, because it was only me writing those first drafts that nobody saw. Nobody will know that I didn't know what the theme was until later. And finally figured out that theme has been there all along. This is an onion you're peeling back, and you're finally figuring out why you're really writing this and what you're really writing about, what the heart and soul of your story is. That's theme. Anyway, you're going to put that in when you know it. Don't rush. We're just going to glance over. This is a big, long document. We're just going to glance over it. Character descriptions. There are two parts of character descriptions. This character is tall. He's taciturn. He's suspicious of everyone, and he only eats potatoes. These are characteristics. Now, how is Warner Brothers has a whole thing we might get into in a later webinar. There are two ways to present any new proposal for a new TV show or a movie, by the way, but right now we're talking about TV. You can either hand an executive a document like that outline or that script, or you can pitch it. And Warner Brothers Studio has a whole thing. They tell you when you come in to pitch, they tell you how they want you to pitch. They tell you what they want you to tell them. And their word is entanglements. How are your characters entangled? Who has known who since kindergarten? Who has hated who since prom? Who served with who in Afghanistan? You get the idea. What are the backstories of these characters that bring them together? Why are they in this story together? And when in your Bible, you want both. You want this guy is a little gullible, fun-loving, always assumes everybody's for the best, or he's suspicious of everyone. Those are his characteristics. Now, who is his sister in the story, or who was his father, or where did he get this idea, or why is he afraid of snakes? That's the backstory, and especially the backstory of how your characters are entangled. And you want both. One of the things I tell my students who are writing pilots is you are not selling a pilot, you're selling the promise of a series. Nobody spends, God, back in my day it was 11 million. I think now it's 30 million. Nobody spends 30 million to create a pilot if they don't believe that the series is going to go. So you're selling a series, and one of the documents that you're going to use to sell the series is this Bible we're talking about. So you've got your character descriptions and their characteristics and their backstory. You're going to tell a bit about your pilot, but not much. You're going to sketch out what happens in the pilot because, again, they're interested in a series. So you're going to go on to give them an explanation of where the first 3 seasons are going. I could actually make this bigger, couldn't I? Where the first three seasons are going. In season 1, back to a very basic story. In season 1, Billy and Sue have a long romance and they get together. In season 2, Billy finds Sue in the arms of another and they get divorced. In season 3, Sue works really hard to get Billy back. Those are the arcs of your seasons, and you're telling these executives either in the writing of your Bible and a few other things we'll go over, or in the pitch, you're telling them where your series is going. And you might also include synopses of episodes. In episode 2, this happens. In episode 3, this happens. In episode 4, this happens. These are the basics that go into a pilot. I'm sorry, a Bible. And we're gonna let's look at a couple of examples of Bibles of shows, because there's 2 different kinds of Bibles. Well, there's 3 different kinds of Bibles. There is a pitch Bible, which is about 10 pages long and is all that stuff we just looked at. There is a show Bible. Voyager's show Bible was 50 pages long. It was details on how the engines work, on how the warp drive works. They wanted their writer, and it's for the writers. They want the writers coming and writing on their show to understand the show the way they do. There's also detailed character descriptions of all your characters, because you haven't seen these guys on TV before. This series has never been on before. We're creating this series now, so I'm going to take a page and tell you all about Commander Janeway or about whoever it is. So that's a show Bible. But that's huge, and that's only for once you're underway. To get underway, you need a sales tool. You need 2 sales tools. You need a pitch Bible, which is the things we're just talking about, and you need your script. And there's one other kind of we sort of that first headless horseman with the picture, that there's a kind of Bible that has graphics. It's called a pitch deck. And we're going to take a quick look at both of these. So this is the Bible from the first season of Fargo, which is now in the 5th season, doing great. Anyway, so this is from 2013, and this document is 12 pages long. But we're going to go through. Noah Hawley's a very interesting writer for a couple of reasons. He's reasonably successful, and he's a bit of an imp. So he starts with a definition of Fargo. This is the story. Again, his Bible starts with telling us a story, basically, in beat by beat. Oh, not quite beat by beat, but pretty much. And then at the end, he says, "Look who's solving them," talking about these crimes, and he gives us the characters. He does not give us what I suggested you do. He does not give us the characteristics or the. He doesn't do it here. He does that part later. He just lists them here. He's got this whole thing about how the show is a triangle. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Now, here are his arcs. Each character is involved in an arc, and here's where we learn more about his characters and the story that they're involved in. And he goes through character by character. Here's one about Lester. This first one is about basically his chief bad guy, Malvo. And then Lester, who you can't really call the hero because there are no heroes in this story. And then there's a page about Molly. You get the idea. Gus. And then he's going to talk about what he calls, he explains what this is. What is a Mike Giganta? It's the quirk that makes this series. And there's 12 pages of a Bible. The other kind of Bible, hold your breath if I can, I have to put my other hat on. The other kind of Bible is a pitch deck. Okay, so what do you see? Is it all big? Jim, does it look like it's supposed to?
No, it's okay though. We can read it.
All right. So this, I'm going to show you, this is the pitch Bible for Stranger Things, which, by the way, used to be called Montauk. And we start with pictures that are, here's that military base, here's a bicycle, something bad has happened here. We're starting with tone before there's a single word. That's what a pitch deck gets you, is tone with these pictures. An epic tale of sci-fi horror is what that says. Now we talk about it. Here's our introduction, but we're going to include pictures. Notice this is a picture from E.T. And he's using movies. Actually, it's two of them. These guys, the creators of the show, are using other movies that everybody knows to kind of give you the tone of their show, and they're crediting them, of course. More pages, then more photos, then more about the story. This one is from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Again, that sort of eerie, supernatural kind of feel is in the pictures as much as it's in the writing. That one is from Altered States. You get the idea. Poltergeist. Anyway, this is a combination of writing and graphics that is called a pitch deck. So the idea is, however, in any of these, the idea is the same. Your Bible. By the way, your Bible has two jobs. One job is to be a sales tool, but the other is to tell you more, you, the writer, about what your show is, what it's about, who the characters are. You want to infuse these characters with, again, who's loved who since first grade, who fought with who in Afghanistan. You want to make your characters living, breathing people. We'll talk more about that in the future. But when you write, it's not you wanting the plot to go this way. It's these living, breathing people who need something, who want something, who are trying to hide something, who are trying to discover something. It's them that drive your story. The things they need to do, the things they have to do, the things they must hide, the things they must discover. That's what drives your story. And the more you know about these characters, the better you can do that. The better they become living, breathing people to you. And the place to make them living, breathing people is your Bible. That's why Bibles are important, not only as a sales tool, but as a place for you to build the lives of these people. And again, if you know them as well as you know your brother, you know what they're going to do in this situation. You don't have to stop and think, well, what would he say about this? You know, because you know these people, because they are living, breathing people to you. Okay. God, I'm gun shy now. Let's take a quick look, if we can, um, at a page from a script. What a page looks like when it's done. And again, does that look like it's supposed to?
It's we can see it. We can read it.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
This is The Crown. This, by the way, this is an episode that was nominated for an Emmy for its writing. And a couple things I want to show you about it is a Netflix, blah, 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 blah. But I want you to notice we have interior, like we talked about, Buckingham Palace, Philip's bedroom, day. That log line, that scene heading is exactly what we talked about. What I want you to notice in the action, there's things that are capitalized. Philip, his valet, they have, just like we did, a crawl that says April 1962 that tells us what time it is, and then we have dialogue. And again, we'll get into more of this in a bit, but this is what a page of a script looks like. When you do get to fade in, this is what it's going to, these scenes are numbered. You get the, okay, blah, blah, blah. That's what it looks like. That's what you finished. This formatting is mostly why you need script software. You can do this on a typewriter. I used to do this on a typewriter way back. I started writing before laptops and when very few people had personal computers. I wrote longhand, and then I went and rented an IBM Correcting Selectric for 3 days because that's what I could afford. And I had 3 days to type it all out and try to get it to somebody. And I got really good at using whiteout strips and rewriting lines that way. That's all. None of that matters right now. But that's what a script looks like. Okay, so let's talk about software for just a minute. At some point in this process, probably when you start writing that outline, you're going to want to switch over to software. There is free script writing software on the market. It's a number of them. I'll mention one of them in a second here. I will tell you right now, they're not as good as the stuff you pay money for. But if you want to get started and just give this a try before you decide if it's something you really want to invest further in, go for it. The 800-pound gorilla in Hollywood is a software called Final Draft. Without exception, every show that I worked on after a certain period, there were several. By the third show I was working on, everybody was using Final Draft. It costs about $250. It's almost always on sale. If you go to the Final Draft site or you can probably get it on sale. And then we have just upgraded to Final Draft 13. And so if you own an old Final Draft, you can upgrade for $100. And again, you should be able to find out on sale for like 80 or 70 or 90 or. I started, by the way, with Final Draft 2 when the guys who created Final Draft, 2 of them, literally worked out of a garage. And when you called, you talked to one of them. Things have changed a great deal, not all for the better. But that's Final Draft. That's if you're going to buy software, don't even look at anything else. Final Draft is the way to go. Now, free software. There are a number of them on the market, but the one I hear the most about, the one that most of my students are using, if they're using free software, is called Celtx. I'll spell that for you: CELTX. Give that a try. You can get it for free. Download it, play with it, see how it works. And if and when you want to do this for real, one of the problems, Final Draft, for example, is cross-platform. You can be an Apple, you can be a PC. Final Draft is not going to matter. It's not going to care. You can make notes in Final Draft. You can make changes in Final Draft. I make notes on my students' work, literally in their draft, and send the notes back to them. There are things that Celtx does not do as well. Celtx is trying to keep up, but there are things that they don't do as well. But none of that may matter to you. The kind of things that are important to me as a teacher, being able to make notes on my students' work, may not matter to you when you're sitting all by yourself writing your screenplay or writing your television show. So give that a try when you're ready. Give that a try. Now, one of the problems with software being so readily available is anybody can sit down and start writing, whether you know the rules of writing or not. For example, that those why are those names capitalized in the script we just saw? And I'm going to tell you again. I learned, God, back in my day, I learned how to write screenplay software. I was at Fox briefly, and before in the 70s. I sat at the feet of the MASH writers for a short while. The only script I wrote that did not get made, but I learned a great deal. But there was a whole office of what were called script girls, and they sat and they typed out and the scripts or the notes that the MASH writers were writing on yesterday's draft. They were making those changes and sending them back. And I got to know one of the script girls, and I learned formatting from her. And here's the rules, and there was no better source. Here's the rules as set up by a script girl at Fox. The things you put in caps are for your crew. You put any speaking character in caps the first time we see him or her, not the first time they're mentioned, the first time we see them. Their name is in all caps, as they were in that example we just looked at, the first time and only the first time. Why? Because speaking characters, whether they're stars or whether they're guest stars, speaking characters get hair, makeup, and wardrobe. Non-speaking characters do not. So the hair and makeup people and the wardrobe people glancing through the script are looking for names in all caps because, oh, that guy, we have to have that guy in hair and makeup. Let's schedule him for Tuesday, 6 o'clock. Props are in all caps. Any object handled by, not a car, but any object like a phone or a knife or a gun that is handled by an actor is a prop and is handled by your prop crew. If there is a phone on your sergeant's desk, but he never answers it, it's not a prop, it's part of the set. But once he picks it up and says, Sergeant Yoakum here, it's a prop. And it therefore is in all caps the first time we see it, so the prop guy or gal knows. Sound effects are in all caps. Camera commands are in all caps. We zoom in. We widen out. We pan left. All of those are commands to the camera crew, and those are in caps because they're for your camera crew. There are a great many writers out there who bought Final Draft and who did not have a script girl who seem to think that anything important is in all caps. Wrong. Any messages to your crew are in all caps. The prop, the first time we see it, a sound effect, a character's name, there aren't that many. Those are the things in all caps. Okay. Let's take a look at one more. We got time here. Let's take a look at one more example of a page. Let's go back to our, and that one should be big enough that you see pretty easily. Yes?
We can see it pretty easily. Go ahead.
Okay. So we're starting again. Exterior, farm field, dusk. This one, by the way, this is kind of like that thing, except this one is written in Final Draft. So we have that same scene. Maggie is in all caps because she's a character. Headless Horseman is in all caps because he's a character. Now, the Headless Horseman raises a fist as he gallops by. If that were instead a sword, it would be in all caps because it's a prop. These are the things that we put in caps, and this is why. And this is what the first page, we could have written fade in here. We can. Let's just do that. There you go. Oops. That would be how we start. All right. Now, that's what you want to do up to and including writing fade in. Jim, will open it up for questions now.